Hey, well, it's wonderful to be here with you today, Alison. What an honour, a privilege. I've been so looking forward to this conversation. You are, of course, a multi-award winning trumpeter who plays all over the world with the finest of conductors and orchestras, from Bach to Bernstein, Handel to Hummel to Haydn, and many, many more. And of course, you've been awarded the OBE for your services to music. Today, we're going to be talking about pushing the frontiers of your craft, your practice, what it takes to perform at the highest levels, and what we can do to inspire the next generation. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm very privileged to be on the show with you.
Fantastic, fantastic. So I said in that introduction that in what you're playing and what you're talking about, you are looking to push the frontiers of what is quite a limited repertoire for the trumpet. That may sound simple to do, but actually can be pretty hard. And I guess my starting question is, how do you actually go about identifying the repertoire that you're most interested in? And of course, then the musicians to work with. What's your process for doing that?
Well, I mean, I think it's a very natural process. I think it's about listening to your gut instinct. I think, from a very young age, I had particular tastes in music. One of the very first things I ever heard that sort of blew my socks off was a Baroque recording of Trevor Pinnock playing with the English Concert. So he made this recording of the Brandenburg Concertos in 1983, and I must have heard it when I was 9. So I was born in 78. So what's that? And my maths is so terrible, but 87 or something. So it'd been out a few years, but it was revolutionary, I guess, at the time, because it was this new understanding and sort of pioneering and quite maverick way of approaching Baroque music. Because up until this time, it had been big romantic style symphony orchestras interpreting Bach and Purcell and Handel and the like, the way that they would interpret Brahms, perhaps, with vibrato and sort of lusciousness and their beautiful sound. But it was this idea that there was another way, to use the instruments that were developed in use catgut for the strings and use, just really explore with the information that became available how those composers would have heard that music. And so one of my very first impressions was this pioneering, courageous, but very natural, innate musician who's Trevor Pinnock, who now is a colleague and a friend. And of course, I've just been working with him. But that set the tone for what I was doing. I started to learn the trumpet at school. I was very lucky at primary school, had the chance to have free music lessons. And I played in my local community brass band. Again, an amazing privilege. Looking back at the time, I took it completely for granted. But that idea that you work with other people who are completely different from you, different age or different background, whatever, but you all came together as one to play a piece. And that really informed my love for the instrument. And it also informed my tastes. If you play in a brass band, you play all sorts of music all the time. If you're playing the cornet in a brass band, it's like the violin in the orchestra. You get to play all the tunes.
All the time.
And it's very challenging technically. There's nothing that a cornet section in a brass band shies away from. They can really do everything. So that was very, very much fun for me. And I made friends with some close friends who I'm still friends with, when I was 7, 8, 9, young girls who were also in the band. And it was just a joy and a pleasure. So everything I played on the trumpet, I needed it to sort of nourish me in some way. And that, of course, informed my musical tastes. Playing in a band, you play. Sitting in an orchestra in the trumpet section, quite often, unless it's, Mahler 9 or something, which not many amateur orchestras can program, you don't have so much to do. And I knew I wanted to be playing, and I wanted to be sort of trying to express myself. And as I got older, I realized that I didn't realize initially that the repertoire was smaller than, say, for the piano or the violin, because it wasn't. But works of great quality in that regard, that was more tricky. And when I was younger, I just played everything, and I just had such a great time socially with my friends who also played. We'd play anything. We'd steal music from other instruments, which is what actually I still do. And I guess it was by default that I had to sort of become, I guess, what you described as it was expanding the horizons, I guess, for an instrument, because there wasn't the music I wanted to play available. One of the reasons for this is that the trumpet had a kind of technological stagnancy, if you like, after the invention of the keyed trumpet, which was when Haydn wrote his amazing concerto and Hummel took it to the next level. After that, things kind of plateaued a bit because the instrument wasn't perfect. The guy who played those concerti, he was a one-off, clearly an incredible musician and technician. But then after that, it was tricky. The trumpet was not treated as a serious art instrument the way that perhaps other woodwind instruments were, and of course, the solo violin or other instruments. And so it was not really until the emergence of jazz in the early, I guess, I'm going to have to be vague here, but sort of early 19th century, when the cornet à piston was invented with the piston valves in Paris. And then jazz, the explosion of jazz in the early 20th century was really the rebirth, the renaissance of the trumpet and all it could do, and its many colors and interesting voices. So that's really helped the classical repertoire as well. This understanding of this instrument having the power, but also the suppleness and the flexibility, the virtuosity. And one of my heroes when I was very young was Dizzy Gillespie, who is it's like he's playing a different instrument to the one I play. The way he plays is so, I could only dream of playing the trumpet like that. But it showed me that it was so versatile, because I knew I loved the trumpet from the age of 7, and he was showing this other side of the instrument that was like, wow, this thing can do anything if you really use your imagination. And so that was and I still feel like that. I have so many frustrations with my own technique or with the repertoire or with, there's frustrations with any kind of art form, but the voice of the instrument, I still completely believe in it. So I feel like it's a lifetime's work just to sort of explore those many voices and see how they can resonate with me personally. The way I play the trumpet is completely different from the way any other soloist might play the trumpet or any other trumpet plays, really, because it's really me using this thing which can do, as I say, almost anything to express myself. And of course, I'm a unique person like we all are.
Absolutely. It's fascinating. I remember taking the train from Wareham in Dorset, where I was brought up, to go into the Royal Festival Hall to Waterloo and watching the United Nations Orchestra with Dizzy Gillespie in the 90s with my dad, and I can still remember that moment.
Oh gosh, I wish I'd been there.
Oh, it was wonderful. It was with Arturo Sandoval and various others. It was fantastic.
I never heard him live, but I know people who did, and I feel quite jealous about that.
It was wonderful. Great spirit, and he just owned the stage, and he wasn't putting it on. It was just him. It was just wonderful. You talked about nourishment, and you talked about exploring. You, as you're developing your own craft, how you no doubt be inundated with opportunities and offers, and you'll have your own pursuits in developing the repertoire in your own craft. How do you make choices beyond obviously what feels good and the nourishment in yourself? How do you actually make choices about where to focus in terms of your own, your own pieces you play in your own schedule? Because I imagine that you have more demands than time allows for.
Well, when I was younger, I was very hungry to prove that I could do it, and that I would, that I could be a soloist on the stage, the global stage, as in a promoter or an orchestra. They're not looking for a trumpeter, they're looking for a soloist. And that means you are being compared with any other instrument or gender or age or looks. All those things are irrelevant. They're looking for something that's just going to have a big aura, something that's going to hold the audience, and it's going to be convincing storytelling. So it's not even about the repertoire necessarily, but as we've already touched on, the repertoire being relatively limited, often I would have offers that were the same as something I'd already done. And when I had a big mortgage to pay and I had a little kid, of course I'd be like, fine, yes, I'll do it all. I've got to just keep, and I've got to make my name. But now I do try not to repeat something for the sake of it. Often it's a really exciting conductor, or it's an orchestra that I've always wanted to play with, or indeed it's new repertoire that's worth getting your teeth into. Or I just come up with the idea myself, and then I go and chase it down, which is something I've got more confidence with over the years. Sort of people who are sort of control freaks, like I may be myself, you feel like if it's your idea, it's a better idea than if someone suggests it to you, even if it's the same idea.
Fantastic. Recently, at the time of this recording, you played the Wynton Marsalis concerto in London, and I know you're playing it in other places. And I was fascinated, and sadly, I couldn't make it for a number of personal reasons. I was very frustrated. But congratulations, because I've seen the adulation and so forth. Fantastic. How did it feel at a personal level to have Winton, who is obviously also an eminent trumpeter and musician and composer, literally not just, it's his concerto, but actually in the audience right in front of you. How did it, what emotions and feelings did that leave you with as you were playing?
Well, a lot of big emotions and feelings, but not as big and intense as when he was sitting in the first rehearsal. Because
I think I saw that photograph.
Yeah, once he's in the audience, once he's in the audience in the concert, no one can really, it goes. You do your best and it's happening. Whereas in the rehearsal, it's very much a sort of you'd be stupid not to let that be a dialogue, even though it was the LSO and Antonio Papano. You'd be wasting an opportunity to have, this living composer who knows exactly what he's doing with every note, sitting right there, and not make the most of that and have a dialogue and see what else you can kind of find out in real time. There were a lot of big personalities in the room that day. So it was on a professional level, it was fantastic. On a personal level, I did have to have a word with myself about not becoming a 9-year-old schoolgirl who was with the teachers, because everyone had a really strong feeling about what was happening and who should be in charge and that kind of thing. And, I feel like if you're the one holding the trumpet and you're the soloist, you need to be in charge, because it's a high wire act. And if you're not doing something really great, everyone's going to know about it. So it was a complicated dynamic, but it was also something I'll never forget in terms of excitement, sort of almost like a moment in history. That you have the LSO there, sort of hungry to learn from the master, and then him really sort of singing like South American rhythms to the percussion section, and singing the way that they wanted the string players to phrase something, or that Winton wanted the string players to phrase something in a really sort of non-classical way, and it was really, really cool. But this piece, I feel like I couldn't have embraced it as much as I now have if I hadn't really felt I had something to say about it. Because, there's plenty of fantastic technicians all over the place who probably could play this. But I feel like I've really got under the skin of it now. And I love it, which means I can communicate it to the audience passively more than if I'm just sort of like doing my duty.
Yes. I mean, the nature of your interactions with an orchestra, whatever type of orchestra or music group is, I mean, I'll simplify, so forgive me, but obviously you'll work with some from time to time, but you come in for a relatively short period of time, you rehearse, you play the concert, and you move on. And obviously you'll nurture those relationships in between. How do you build, those relationships, especially with a new orchestra, in a relatively brief amount of time? Because in different contexts, in the business world and so forth, the interactions take place over sometimes a longer period. And I wonder about, you talked about the dynamics in that specific moment, but around the degree of mutual respect, curiosity, degree of competitiveness. How would you describe the relationship between, for example, you and the orchestra?
Well, I would say that this is where the business world, the world in general, could learn so much from artists, musicians, classical musicians, because it is such a finely nuanced and balanced machine of great complexity, and it is both the rigor and the discipline and the standards are like unbelievably high, and yet everyone, to be their best, has to be open-minded, has to be very, very in the moment, aware of the conversation and the adaptability to what someone else is doing. The energy flow is far more sophisticated, I would argue, than anything that you could do verbally. It's about feeling and about as I started this, this chat, about your gut instinct. And with an orchestra where you just fit together, what is that exactly when you've got very little time and it just works and it just feels like a perfect marriage? How did that happen? Sometimes that doesn't happen. And when it doesn't happen, everyone has to be super professional, and they know the bare minimum that is required is a very, very high level. But often, all the time, we're all looking for that moment of magic where you've met these people you don't know.
Yes.
And it's like a super, super quick, I don't know, it's like a sort of energy superhighway that you've got to tap into. And it's something that I feel that as humans, we don't know that much about yet. What does what's happening when we listen. It's much more complicated than perhaps when we watch or see, that we know that the ears take in vast amounts of more information than the eyes, for example. And, your sixth sense, if you like, this thing that it's really hard to describe, that is something that musicians are very, very in tune with. It's like a cliche. They're in touch with it. And so I think I'm looking for that every single time I meet a new person or group or new project. It's like we're looking for the energy flow to be positive, and it doesn't mean it has to be the perfect match. It's not like your life partner just has to tick so many boxes, but you're looking for the ones that it does tick, and then you grab onto those and you use those. I've done I'm just thinking of a couple of projects I've done where actually one I can mention. I was working with a pianist, and on a sort of friend level, not that I didn't have huge respect for this person, but I didn't really feel that this would be my friend. And I found the person quite strange to kind of interact with as a sort of in a verbal, chatty way. But as soon as we played together, it was like a perfect understanding of each other's musicianship. Wow. And this is the sort of thing that all relationships need to look for. Like, don't look at the differences, look for the similarities. And I think musicians just innately understand that so much more than other people who are slightly more fearful of difference.
That's so powerful. That's so powerful. And you referred earlier and in other conversations to effectively the high wire act. I mean, you talk and the really, really high standards. It's not as though you can hide. put it simplistically. No. If you had to distill what really helps you, really excel in those higher wire acts where you think, actually, you know what, I've nailed it in my own way. I've nailed that piece, that concerto, and so on. What helps? What if you had to just name three things? Obviously, there's lots of things, but what would you say helps you the most?
I would say, finding the sense of flow. People talk about flow a lot these days. In yoga, if you really in your yoga session, you might find your flow, which is this wonderful, relaxed concentration state. If you can get there, you're going to do a good job. I also personally have realized I always used to be filled with sort of guilt and self-doubt and slight shame. But if I would stop, if I felt I hadn't enough practice, but you can really overdo your practice with the trumpet. I know people who are incredibly diligent with their practice and they've just kind of gone over the other side and they can't really do it the way they used to. And I've found that focusing incredibly intensively on my practice or my projects, what I'm doing, and then completely stopping to the point where I'm not playing the trumpet for like a month or maybe longer, 2 months occasionally. And then when I pick the trumpet up again, it's terrible, because I don't have those muscles, the stamina, but it's almost like a restart. It's a rebuild. So you have to rebuild yourself not from the start. Of course, I've been doing it for 37 years. It's in me, it is me. But you rebuild your technique and you check your posture, you check your breathing, you check everything, you check what's going on with your embouchure. And it's probably an easier way to eradicate issues, to check in from this, from this a bit more sort of the start, if you like. I do think that's a huge thing in terms of resilience and perspective on whether you're doing something that's any good. And the other thing is just you have to believe in what you're doing. If you don't 100% believe in the music, the content, you've got no chance of communicating that or engaging an audience or a listener and touching them in any way. Because, if the intention, essentially, if your intention is wrong, like you're doing it because you want someone to think you're cool or you want to make it sound like your technique's amazing, it means nothing after about 30 seconds. And so somewhere, even if it's not your favorite piece of music you've ever played in your life, you've got to find the things in it that you love, because otherwise there's nothing to communicate, and that is essential.
No, I agree. How do you know when you've really touched people, where you've had the impact you're looking for, beyond the obvious things like, standing ovations, applause? That's obvious, and that's nice, of course. But how do you know yourself when you've done what you intended?
I don't think you do know. I think you can again, like Trevor Pinnock mentioned this word intention. Your intention is, the authentic intention of what you're doing, if you are authentically doing it, that's your best chance of moving people. And I've had situations where I haven't perhaps thought it was it wasn't a slam dunk. It wasn't like every single note was perfect. And it was the one where I was like, yes, mic drop, that's me, perfect. That's the best one I've ever done. And there were maybe aspects of it that I struggled with in some way, but I don't believe that the audience felt it, because what they felt was me 100% committed to what I was doing. Right. And that's what made more of an impression than the actual result. And vice versa. You could think, that was great. I did a great job then, but perhaps you were a little bit smug. And so it didn't really touch anyone. And I think as one gets older, I think a lot of people talk about humility, that you learn with age and wisdom, is you get more humility. But I do think at the beginning, you need to start with a lot of sort of chutzpah.
I agree with that too. And before you walk out on stage, you talked about the preparation before then, in terms of both mindset and taking a break. And when you're literally a few minutes before you're going up on stage, what goes through your mind and what do you practically do, if you don't mind me asking?
Practically, I make sure that I haven't done that thing that we often do, many people do, which is as soon as you feel a little bit scared or stressed or panicked or not super comfortable, your breathing goes to about here, and you can often hear it in people's voices because they start doing this a little bit and it's all a bit high. And if you do that, you're absolutely done for. Particularly if you've got a physically demanding thing ahead of you. With the trumpet, it's got to be that. So it is a conscious decision to make sure that's not happening and breathe through it down to slower, deeper breathing. And there's a lot of research now where breathing out through your nose, breathing through your nose in and out, but particularly out, is something that engages your parasympathetic nervous system, which means it is calming your body. It is a fact that that's happening. And so I do that. I also, that thing, I don't know if the book In a Game of Tennis. I think there was another new one called In a Game of Music or something. But there's a lot of that moment. That there's never a time more in my life when you might have that little person on the shoulder going, "Can you do this? Can you? Are you going to mess this up?" And at that point, I always have that, but I always have to have this other guy going, "I'm going to show you."
You got this.
And I also, whatever it takes, I care a lot. I get really nervous before I go on the stage. But I also noticed, I know myself, and I personally found it, when my granny was alive and my granny was in the audience, I would find that much harder to perform my best and really, nail it, as you say, than once when I had someone who really hated me and was really tricky when I was younger, and they came to the concert, and I knew why they came to the concert. They really wanted me to mess up once I knew that they were at the concert. And that was like the most amazing fuel, which sounds like a very negative thing to say, but it was like, it inspired me to go to this place where I could find my mettle and go, I'm stronger than you think. And that was much, that sort of, I guess I'd like to not say it was negative and positive, but I didn't want to let my granny down. Whereas with this other person, I wanted to really show them what I could do, So I don't know what that is. I don't know what the science is behind that, but I know myself, and I know that when I just dig into that place. And also sometimes I'm like, it's a sort of sang-froid. It's like, oh, let's see what's going to happen. It's quite exciting. Maybe it will go wrong. Maybe it won't go wrong. But you know that you've done the preparation. You know what to do here. And if it goes wrong, it would be unfortunate, rather than like, wow, I need some luck here to make it go well. That would be a terrible place to walk on in front of a professional symphony orchestra with. Like, I hope I can do this. You have to know that you can do it, unless there's some extraordinary set of circumstances, which means something goes wrong.
Yeah. So you have the nerves. You obviously control your breathing, the mind, your mind, but then you do then perform at your best. And the reason I say that is, I know a number of people in different walks of life, whether in the creative music space or others, where they do control their nerves, but some come off the equivalent of a stage and think, Yeah, I was better in rehearsal. So they haven't controlled or created the space or that space in themselves and relied on their technique to really just channel it and focus on what they're doing. There is still, whether it's the inner voice, the nerves, the breathing, that they haven't got in control. So I guess what I'm sensing is you still have that, but actually you can switch when you do get up on stage and you start and create that space for
And
yourself.
also what you're saying about, I'm not quite sure what kind of discipline you're talking about when you say, oh, I was better in rehearsal, the person that would say that they're better in rehearsal, but
So
I
a
would say,
speaker, for example.
yeah, but I would say you're almost certainly not better in rehearsal. You may have made less mistakes, but you're
Mm,
almost certainly in some way, even in a small way, phoning it in. Whereas when you're on stage for real, there's no part of you that's like, oh, I'll do it again in a minute, so I'll just, coast this bit. You are
you're all in.
absolutely, you've got everything you've got inside you, you have to give. and and that, as I was saying earlier, that is worth more on the stage than anything else. People, that's
Yes,
why
yes.
live, that's why people are so, why this is the age of live performance, because anything else can be tweaked and doctored and perfected online and posted as perfect, but live, it has the highest
That's the
value
beauty
now.
of it. That's the beauty of it.
Yeah, yeah.
Now I'm fascinated. I mean, you've with the different pieces you played, and I've been re-listening to various recordings as preparation for this. And it's been I have to say, wonderful journey and a privilege. Uh, you played some really very, very demanding pieces, and with the Marsalis piece recently, but many others. When you've sort of turned the page, or on the iPad or whatever, on the pad, and you've looked at a piece and you thought, wow, I mean, even your level, that's tricky. But you struggled with it. Just tell me about perhaps a moment when you thought, wow, that's either really high, it's a sound that's difficult, it's technically very hard, and how you've overcome it. I guess what I'm really asking is, have you ever had a moment when you thought, gosh, I'm not sure I can do this, and then really had to work at an element of a concerto or piece? Or
You mean I'm not sure I can do this, and then you carry on working until you can do it?
yes, because again, in other fields, people will say, look, to be honest, I've got to a level, and although I have to put my own interpretation on it, my own the equivalent of musicality, I can cover the basis of many things. Whereas I guess some of the more recent components, they are intentionally, at least this is my read, they're really trying to push the boundaries of technical difficulty.
Yeah, I mean, what's really amazing about Winton's concerto is that he knows what he's doing for the instrument, and it's not an easy concerto, but it is well written. When someone just does something on Sibelius and they don't fully understand the characteristics of the instrument, that just makes me feel really angry, because it's like, I could spend the next 2 years, 7 hours a day learning to do 6 pages of semiquavers, but it will wreck the rest of my technique. I won't be able to play anything else, and the piece isn't even that good. That stuff makes me really angry. But to be honest, I don't play those pieces much anymore. When you initially asked me this question, I was thinking about when I recorded the Paganini Caprice, and it was a kind of version of it. It wasn't the whole thing, because it was just not possible to do triple stopping or whatever. When you play 3 notes at once on the violin, you can't do that on the trumpet. So I did a kind of version of it, but it was technically pretty out there. And I listened to it recently. I haven't played it for years. I listened to it the other day and I thought, oh my God, I really had some balls to think that I could just play that. And I remember practicing it on holiday. I remember being in Dorset, and everyone was going to the beach, and I was like, no, I'm going to get through this Paganini if it kills me. And it was fun. It was really fun. I think I probably wouldn't do it again, because it is just a case of just to see if you can, rather than the musical benefit. But I'm actually in Norway right now, and I was here this time last year, and that's when I started to look at the Marsalis concerto really in depth, and I wasn't close to the piece. And then I didn't spend the whole of the last year learning it, but I on and off. And now I've played it with the orchestra, a couple of different orchestras, and I'm about to play it again in 2 weeks, and it feels like, I mean, who knows how it's going to go? It's a live show, right? But I feel really on top of it. I feel like now I'm looking for the next level below, what else is going on in the orchestral parts that I can feed off. And I know it from memory pretty much. And so it means I'm sort of able to just sort of park that, where you waste energy, like reading a score, I can save that energy and put it into the way I'm
Yes, you can
executing
really
it.
channel it.
And it's like, wow, looking back, it was like, wow, it's a huge journey I've come on. And it was just really time and patience and studying and experience of the shows and the private practice. And that feels like an amazing achievement, I guess, because I didn't think I'd be able to play it, and now I can play it. And also, it's so enjoyable to have a problem that's hard, that
Yes,
takes that long to solve, but is solvable, if you know what I mean.
yes,
It's
yes.
so nourishing to just kind of chip away at something. And I very rarely had that. I said to a good friend of mine, it's like someone just handing me the Tchaikovsky violin concerto. You don't, to a violinist. I was like, you don't understand. This is like being given something that's hard, but it's going to take up all my time and my brain power and it's so enjoyable. And in the past, I feel like I'm sort of scrabbling around to find things to play that are both musically interesting and audiences want to hear them.
That's fantastic. I mean, as you're on this journey, you're pushing the frontiers and you're overcoming these hard problems. How do you nurture your own resilience? Because in some ways it comes across, this is on you, right? So you're practicing on your own. You're thinking about it. Yes, you're engaging, obviously, whether it's with the composer if they're alive, with orchestras and so on. But it's on you. So over the course of a year, how do you nurture yourself? How do you manage yourself so you can peak, obviously, at the right times? And enjoyment is a word you use many times in this conversation, which is fantastic, by the way. Actually enjoy life rather than it becoming, oh gosh, I've got to go to another concert, I've got to do this. How do you nurture yourself? How do you look after yourself?
Well, it is. I mean, obviously, there's exceptions to this, but it's much harder for mothers than it is for the rest of the population, because no matter how much you give your children, you feel like you could be giving them more. And no matter how much you give your instrument, you feel like you could be giving it more.
Yes,
It's
yeah.
like learning a language. There's never a point where you go, I've done that now. And so that has, for me, I've just been incredibly fortunate that, I worked so hard at my career and I was traveling the world constantly when I was a bit younger. And my son, for the first few years of his life, he was just coming with me, and I was just able to make it work. And at that point, and then it was very tricky when he was young and he was at school, but I made it work. And I've been basically a soloist for 25 years now, and I am so lucky that I'm not just traveling around the world the whole time now, and I'm choosing not to. And it's very easy in a way, because I choose to do the things I want to do, which is like the dream, isn't it? Because then everything you do, you commit to 110%. But then it was a case of being incredibly organized, knowing what you've got in your diary, knowing what's gonna, there might be a piece you've got in 9 months and you start practicing it now because it's really, really difficult, not necessarily technically, but in some way, or the stamina that's required. But you might have something next week and you just think, oh, that's going to be fine, I'm not going to worry about that. And it's just knowing yourself well enough to know how much you need to put in of your time and your concentration. And then, as I say, I have always naturally just been super into like restoring old pieces of furniture, or sanding down a chest of drawers, or like making something out of some, getting my welder out to make, and I love doing stuff like that. I just always making stuff. So sometimes, more often than not, I'm like, I do have a concerto coming up. I probably should go and spend a bit longer on the trumpet, but I've got to finish this welding or this like nailing something together thing. That I think that is a healthy balance, I have to say. And again, as I'm sure that many of your guests have probably, inferred, everything comes down to sort of your human interaction in the end. Even though I'm a soloist, so it could be a very alone thing to do, it really isn't. You have to be able to interact with others and forge relationships that make things greater than the sum of the parts. And I think it's healthy. If you've got a life away from your work, is always going to eventually inform your work in a really good way somehow.
I agree. Oh, that's so refreshing to hear. I mean, even as a father, I've and a father of a severely disabled child, I've had to keep telling myself, especially over the last few years, where I actually have the ability now to make choices about where I focus, who I work with, where I've grown up with, and partly the organisations I worked within, and my own mindset of it's all about effort, volume, activity, and stopping the comparisons of, okay, so many other people in my field effectively have either no children, no commitments, and focus. Good for them. Well done. Great. I'm ploughing my own furrow, and actually have other aspects of my life. And for that's me. That's who I am, and this is what I give. And it feels quite liberating. And as we draw to a close, and sensitive to your time and schedule, a more philosophical question: what impact are you looking to have on the world around you in what you do, and how would you like to be remembered? Even though you've got a long way to go, of course.
Wow. I don't know, because it is, journalists always say, oh, it's strange for you, unusual to be a girl playing the trumpet. And it's like, maybe it is, because it is quite a physically demanding instrument. And my answer is always to say, yes, but it's like you need the strength, like a dancer has strength rather than a weightlifter has strength, because it's more interesting to be expressive than it is just strong. But there were less girls and boys when I was younger, even though it didn't really make any difference to me. And also some of my best friends were also female brass players. And then the media thought that was interesting. But it is really cool to me that girls think, yeah, I can do that. I can see there's a woman doing it there. I'm going to do that. Why not? Because I never really had any barriers. My parents certainly, there was no like, well, you're a girl, you have to do this or that. Mm-hmm. But then when I see it now, there are still gender barriers and stereotypical barriers all over the place. And so just to break any of those down would be fantastic. And also with classical music, people often say, oh, the state of classical music in the UK, which is true. The money hasn't, been invested in right at the beginning to allow so many people who have talent in music and the arts to flourish and find their voice. That's not been possible, which is of course trickling through now to the tops of our artistic organizations, which is a disaster. But eventually we will all realize the importance of it, and it will come, I believe, probably optimistic. I don't know if it's optimistic, but psychically we'll, is that the word? Psychically, because the cycle will come round again to realize the importance of the arts and music, and classical music will always be there because it's so bloody brilliant and it gives so much. The more you look into it, the more you get from it, and the more you listen, the more you hear. So I feel very confident about classical music's survival, if you like, but I also want to be someone who is a gateway for people to discover classical music. I would be very, very proud if that was a legacy, I guess.
Yeah.
And obviously like expanding the repertoire and showing people that this instrument that is very popular, everyone knows what the trumpet is, but show that can be a voice for people if they're not necessarily incredibly verbally articulate, that a musical instrument can be a voice which is just as valid as any other.
I'm sorry to bore you on with it, but that's inspirational. My son, who he has various music therapists. He sat, for example, in a Wigmore Hall concert for an hour, more than an hour, listening to a harp quartet, sitting still, and he normally sits still for about a minute. He sat still, mesmerized, no props, no distractions, no food, nothing. And if it can touch somebody like him with all of his challenges, it's magical. And I've loved this conversation. I'm grateful for your craft, what you do, giving us a window in terms of how you think, how you act, what you're trying to do. I take my hat off to you. I've loved your work. What's next beyond the next concert? What's the next big adventure?
So I've got a Baroque album coming out, which I'm really excited about because it's a new thing in that it's the piccolo trumpet, which is a modern invention, if you like. Really, you hear it first on Penny Lane by the Beatles. Put with Trevor Pinnock's hand-picked, incredible, authentic instrument ensemble. So it's sort of putting the Baroque style with this modern thing. So that's coming out, and I'm really proud of it. But then after that, I want to do something that's a bit bigger, actually. I want to do something which encapsulates everything I feel about the trumpet all into one project performance. So watch this space.
Wow. Intriguing. Thank you, Alison. Thank you. Well, that was another edition of Lancefield on the Line. I do hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. Please do check out the other episodes in the series. Sign up to the YouTube channel, to the podcast, give us a nice rating. And Alison, thank you ever so much again. Wonderful.
Pleasure. Nice to meet you.